wanted to be called a girl, they wanted to use the girls' facilities. In court, the decision by the court was based on a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria. So they allowed it. But a fraction of our state, or a part of our state, has said that that's settled law, that any boy can become a girl. And that's not true. It's heartbreaking, Mr. Speaker, to know there's nothing we can do to protect these girls. It's heartbreaking to watch them not stand on the top and that failed. It failed by quite a bit in the House, in the committee. Then I put an amendment on it. That didn't work. I've also come up with a floor amendment and have gone to a member of the Judiciary Committee and said, look, if you take this floor amendment, if you pass my bill, the ought to pass amendment, if you pass my bill and put this amendment on it, all the amendment does is it affects our schools. It protects our girls' sports, our girls' bathrooms, locker rooms, and showers. And it says that differentiating between a boy and a girl in K through 12 is not discrimination. Please consider this. It's simple. It's a surgical approach to this problem, and it corrects this and gives our girls back some dignity. No, we're not going to do that either. It doesn't appear that we're going to be able to do anything at this point unless another bill is passed, which I don't have much hopes for, to protect and save our girls. I implore my colleagues in this chamber to think about these children. Think about the little girl. Right now, if a little girl is in a shower in a sports club, 10, 12-year-old sports girl in a sports club, anywhere in our state, an adult 50-year-old man can walk into the shower with her and stand there. That's amazing to me, that we allow that we've given that right, as well as what we've done in our school. We need to find a way to fix this and give our children back their dignity. Show the love, kindness, and respect for these little girls that they deserve. They're one of the most precious things that we have, are our little girls. But what are we treating them like? Like they're nothing. Like they mean nothing to our society, nothing to our heart, nothing to our soul, nothing to the heartbeat of our state and who we are. Mr. Speaker, once again, I would like to ask my colleagues here in this chamber to please take action, protect our girls, and ensure that we have safety and fairness in our school system. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the representative from Portland, Representative Moonen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, colleagues of the House, I always try to find points of common ground, so I guess I will start by saying I too love Elton John and Freddie Mercury. Other than that, I don't know what quite to say in response to what was just said. You know, this is not a sports bill. We're about to get to those bills shortly. This bill is about removing gender identity altogether from the Maine Human Rights Act. And I want everyone to understand what that means. That means legalizing employment discrimination, legalizing housing discrimination, legalizing discrimination in public places, in credit, and I'm missing one. Oh yeah, education. That is a wild, extreme overreach. The Maine Human Rights Act was updated to include both sexual orientation and gender identity by the legislature in 2005. That bill was signed by the governor. A people's veto was filed to try and overturn it, and the voters voted by a strong majority to keep that law in place. That is the law we are talking about here. Not something narrow, not something that's going to be debated in another bill later. The entire law of the Human Rights Act. This bill is one of the most extreme I've ever seen. The contents of the bill don't match anything that was just said in the speech before me. I urge people, even if they have points of genuine disagreement on the issue of sports, to recognize this bill for how bad it is and how horrifying it would be to go back to legalizing employment discrimination and housing discrimination and on and on. Please join me in voting on not to pass.
Chair recognizes the representative from Phillips, Representative Sobolewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Briefly, evidently the representative didn't understand what I said. I amended the bill and used a scalpel type approach to just have it affect K through 12. I asked the lead chair from the House of the Judiciary Committee to please take a look at it, pass my bill, ought to pass bill on the floor and amend it with this new amendment, and that was rejected. So the bill would not contain anything that the representative just mentioned. It's solely about K through 12 is what I proposed amendment. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the representative from Falmouth, Representative Kuhn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to bring us back quickly just to the bill we are actually voting on. This bill seeks to amend the Maine Human Rights Act. The amendment adds the term gender identity to the definition of sexual orientation and strikes other references. I think the intent was to eliminate gender identity as a protected status, but it, in fact, does not do that. The majority of the committee voted ought not to pass to preserve the more clear and concise language of the Act as it currently exists and to ensure that Maine's prohibitions on discrimination persist. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the representative from Portland, Representative Skold.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues of the House. I hesitate to rise because I don't want to prolong our day too much. In fact, I'm hoping we get out at a reasonable hour because I have a date tonight. And at the risk of perhaps needing to text that person and let them know that I'll need to reschedule, I'm just going to proceed with a little bit of my story. So in 2005, Maine voters affirmed at the ballot box a bill that had been signed by the legislature and the governor, a bill that added sexual orientation and gender identity to the Maine Human Rights Act. Now, at the time, I was a junior at Freeport High School. And though I and many of my classmates were too young to vote at that time, my social studies teacher did give us the space to have a classroom discussion and debate on the matter. And at the time, my 16-year-old self was actually uncertain about this idea and more of the position that we should not be giving the same explicit legal protections from discrimination that history has shown we need for race, color, national origin, and religion and sex. In fact, part of my hesitation at that time related to my perception of a disagreement or some space between the ideas of sexual orientation and religion. At the time, I was a very earnest 16-year-old believer in a particular branch of Christianity and was in fact attending the same church as my friend, the good representative from Auburn. And now I'm turning 36 this year, Mr. Speaker, and a lot has happened in my life over the last 20 years, including learning to understand and embrace my family members and friends who have come out publicly in their sexual orientations, learning to understand and embrace my friends and family who have come out in their gender identities, and learning to understand and embrace myself, my own authentic self as a queer gay man. In those last 20 years, I have come to see the wisdom of that 2005 vote. And I believe the people of Maine have come to see the wisdom of their decision as well. Over the years, gay and trans Mainers have thrived in this state, free from discrimination, and they have made our state better. They have made our state better, not just through their own accolades and contributions to our communities, but also because protecting everyone from discrimination protects us all. Now, I could go more into my own long and circuitous story of how I changed, Mr. Speaker, and how I learned to understand my authentic self. But if I did that, we'd be here for a few hours longer, and I would definitely miss my date tonight. So I will just say that I am grateful for that journey and the freedom that it has brought me. I am grateful for the ability that people can change. I am grateful for the Mainers since 2005 and long before who have fought for protections from discrimination for all. I am grateful to live in a state where my freedom to thrive is not hampered by the gender of the person I hope to spend time with tonight. And I am proud to stand here with the people of Maine to make sure that the same freedom from discrimination is afforded to all the people of Maine, regardless of their gender. And though I am not a Christian anymore, I sometimes still find wisdom in some of the recorded sayings of Jesus. When he was asked about the law, which is the greatest commandment in the law, this was his response: "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and all your soul, and all your strength. This is the greatest and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself."
Pending questions, acceptance of the majority ought not to pass report. Is the House ready for the question? The chair open the vote. The Sergeant at Arms secure the chamber. First call of absentees. Five members in their seats who have not yet voted. Four members in their seats who have not yet voted. Three members who have not yet voted. One member who has not yet voted. Have all now voted? Chair will close vote. Clerk run total. Chair will announce the vote. 81 voting in the affirmative, 65 in the negative. The motion prevails. It will be sent to the Senate. Is there objection to all matters acted upon being sent forthwith, with the exception of matters being held? Hearing none, ordered sent forthwith. Divided report.
Item success.
Chair stands. Representative Falmouth. Representative Kuhn. Mr. the committee report be dispensed with. This motion is out. It's a vote. Chair recognizes Representative Falmouth. Representative Kuhn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House adopt the majority ought not to pass report.
Representative Falmouth. Representative Kuhn moves the House to accept the majority ought not to pass report. Chair recognizes Representative from Skowhegan. Representative Poirier.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I request a roll call.
Representative from Skowhegan. Representative Poirier requests a roll call. Sufficient number requesting roll call. A roll call is in order. The chair recognizes the Representative Palermo. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the House, I rise to oppose this motion. We can no longer exist in the gray. It is the gray that is dividing this state, and it is this division that brings us to this moment of absolutely needing to make a decision regarding boys and girls spaces, and with this bill, specifically their bathrooms. We need to exist in the black and white with this issue, and it's going to take all of us here to be the adults in the room and make hard decisions that some people seem to be uncomfortable making. The black and white is that biological boys do not belong in girls' bathrooms. Hard stop, end of story. I've talked to young girl after young girl, and they say the same thing to me. They want privacy. This isn't necessarily about fear of an assault, as some people will try to say. No one is saying at all that a boy identifying as a girl goes into the girls' bathrooms to do that, though it has happened in some instances. What girls are saying is that they want a space of their own. They want a space to go ahead and change a tampon on their own. We're all adults here. These things happen. They sometimes are in messy situations, nerve-wracking for a young girl that needs to have her private space. And it is the girls that need to be comfortable. I am not here. We should not be here to make the very few who want to go into a girl's bathroom be comfortable. We need to listen to these girls. It is their decision, and we need to respect that. Girls want to have a place not only to take care of these issues, but to go in and have a giggle or a cry with their girlfriends. This is that space. Bathrooms create that space for them. Can a woman not have anything of their own anymore? We've come so far, we cannot go back. Everything women fought for throughout decades of struggle has seemingly vanished. Our safety, our privacy, our dignity. Enough is enough. We need to stand up and protect girls and their mental health today. Now, we cannot sacrifice the many for the few who are struggling with identity. I am not here to stand against anyone, but I absolutely am going to stand for girls each and every day, and they are asking us to give them their private spaces to make sure that bathrooms are solely reserved for our girls. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the representative from Falmouth, Representative Kuhn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to clarify that the question of bathroom use has been settled law in Maine since at least 2014, when the law court ruled that a school district in Oro violated the Maine Human Rights Act when it did not allow a transgender girl to use a bathroom consistent with her gender identity. I would also add that data show that, in fact, it is transgender people who are more in danger in bathrooms and locker rooms, not their cisgendered peers. This bill seeks to impose restrictions that are in conflict with an inclusive school environment, in violation of current law, and will undoubtedly subject Maine to costly litigation. I urge the members to support the pending motion.
Pending questions, acceptance of the majority ought not to pass report. Is the House ready for the question? The chair open the vote. The sergeant at arms secure the chamber. One member who has not yet voted. Have all now voted? Have all now voted? Chair will close the vote. Click on toll. Chair will announce the vote. 74 voting in affirmative, 72 in the negative. The motion prevails. It will be sent to the Senate. Is there objection to all matters from act being sent forthwith, with the exception of matters being held? Hearing none, ordered sent forthwith. Chair now lays before the House supplement number 11. Reports of committees and first reading company bills and resolves. Divided report. The chair.
Item
the
6-1,
chair would-
Senate Bill 145 LD 380, an act to amend certain laws regarding gender affirming healthcare services. Majority report of the Committee on Judiciary reporting ought not to pass. Signers majority report. Senator from Cumberland.
The chair understands Representative Falmouth,
Majority.
Representative Kuhn, Mr. Lee,
Senator
committee
from
purposes
Cumberland.
for the
Ross.
pleasure of the House.
Representative
It's a vote. The chair recognizes Representative Falmouth, Representative Kuhn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House adopt the majority ought not to pass report.
Representative from Falmouth, Representative Kuhn, moves House to accept the majority ought not to pass report. Chair recognizes the Representative from Skowhegan, Representative Poirier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request a roll call.
Representative from Skowhegan, Representative Poirier requests a roll call. Sufficient number requesting a roll call. Roll call is in order. Chair recognizes the Representative from Palermo, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't expect to be rising so quickly, but I wanted to go ahead and oppose this motion. Throughout this session, all I've heard from the other side is that minors' brains are not developed enough for gun ownership, not for marriage, and not for a punishment that should fit their crime. But we come back to this issue that says 16 and 17-year-olds should be able to choose without parental approval hormone replacement therapy. And so at 16 and 17, we're now seeing that they can choose to destroy their fertility, change the entire trajectory of their life, and have an increased risk of strokes. Their bone health will deteriorate with constant pain, and it will impact their brain development. The UK has stopped this as of March of last year. They have said no more minors with hormone therapy. We are behind the times in keeping this legislation. If we've listened to detransitioners at all and the story they've told, we need to put brakes on this. We need to stop from encouraging this with kids who are still developing. They can make these decisions later in life. But continuing gender-affirming care for 16 and 17-year-olds does no one any good, except maybe the people who are making the money off of it. So I urge you to vote down this motion. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the Representative from Falmouth, Representative Kuhn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amended bill seeks to repeal legislation from the 131st legislature, which created a pathway for certain gender-affirming care for 16 and 17-year-olds. That law was very carefully considered and drafted to include very specific parameters on when this care is available. The individual must be at least 16 years of age and must be diagnosed with gender dysphoria by a qualified healthcare professional. In the opinion of the healthcare professional, the minor has to be experiencing harm from not receiving gender-affirming care. The minor must inform the healthcare professional that they have sought their parents' permission and the parent refused to support the treatment. Written consent from the minor must include giving the circumstances that the minor must be physically and mentally capable of consent. The healthcare professional must tell the minor that they can withdraw the decision to commence therapy at any time. The healthcare professional must clearly and fully explore with the minor alternative choices available for treating gender dysphoria. Healthcare professionals must explain the psychological effects and possible consequences of gender-affirming therapy and follow-up care, including psychological consequences. The healthcare professional must discuss the possibility of including the minor's parents in the minor's decision-making, and the healthcare professional must provide the minor sufficient time to ask any questions and receive explanations of the effects and possible negative consequences of the treatment. This law expressly recognizes that it is best when young people are able to confer with adults in their life about important healthcare decisions. Yet, as we learned in the committee in the 131st, for some people, that is not a safe thing to do, and in fact can result in abuse, neglect, even being forced into homelessness. It was for this very small group of young people that this law sought to provide a pathway for help. Because for these kids, gender-affirming care can literally be life-saving, and the repeal of this law would put those kids at risk. I urge the members to support the pending motion.
Chair recognizes the Representative from Rumford, Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen of the House. I know that the temperature in here today is a little elevated, and I know that these are issues that are really important, I would say, to all of us in this room. Even though we find ourselves on different sides, they're things that we're very passionate about and we care deeply about. So I'm going to do my best to share my thoughts in a respectful and compassionate manner. But this bill is a repeal of a bill that passed on the 131st. I did serve on the Judiciary Committee the 2 years prior to this one. And we worked the concept of this bill at length, and it was actually introduced by, how I remember, your predecessor from Biddeford, Representative Sheehan, and although I think you were her predecessor before she was your predecessor, but she introduced LD 535, and it was educational for me, and it was kind of eye-opening as far as gender-affirming care, whether the surgical side of it, the hormone replacement therapy, and I tried to dive into the subject matter just to understand how the process worked. And I'm no expert by any means, but I did find that I learned a lot during the process of that debate. And although I did oppose LD 535 in the 131st, it did end up becoming law. And that current law states that a minor, 16 or 17 years old, can receive gender-affirming care without parental consent, and that gender-affirming care being hormone replacement therapy. What we did learn, some of the things we learned in committee last year, is that the effects of HRT, while in some may take longer, the physical effects can be irreversible in just a few months. We heard some pretty heartbreaking stories of detransitioners that came to testify, and I actually had a pretty unique opportunity the night before the public hearing to sit down with a nationally known detransitioner named Prisha Mosley. And I spent about 3 hours with her, me and a couple other colleagues. She had an incredibly powerful and moving story, very real. She's an incredible individual just in general, but her story was very moving. But the detransitioners who spoke to the Judiciary Committee, they were allowed and encouraged to transition in their teens, just to realize that later that they'd made a great mistake. Prisha Mosley, who I just mentioned, shared a heartbreaking story of how she started testosterone at just 17 years old and had a double mastectomy a year later. And in her early 20s, she began detransitioning. She's been quoted to say, "I decided that I didn't want to be a woman before I ever had experience in being a woman. I had no idea what being a woman was like because I was a child. Now I feel like I will never entirely know. I just took the cure that was handed to me," she said through sobs. "I just don't want anyone else to feel this way. I lost my voice. I lost my chest. I don't know if I'm going to be able to have kids. I feel like no one wants to date me or love me because I'm ruined." A quote from the New York Times, she says, "I could go on and on how tremendous the weight is, but what's worse is that it can happen to other people. The pain of imagining that someone else could feel or experience what I'm experiencing makes the pain of being a public case study numb. It doesn't compare. No one came and saved me when I was little. No one told me the truth." The New York Times goes on to say, "Sadly, Mosley knows what the truth is, and it hurts. Her body has been ravaged. She says her liver is big, her insulin is high, her uterus, bladder, and vagina have atrophied." Now, I understand that this is just a story of one detransitioner, one brave enough to step forward and share the intimate details of her physical health, a bravery that many of us in this room would be too ashamed to share. And while I recognize that this may not be the path for every person struggling with gender dysphoria, I also recognize that gender dysphoria is legitimate and a very real struggle for a rising number of youth in our state. The feelings of anxiety, the feelings of internal disunity, and at face value, my vote on these issues don't entirely tell the whole story, don't really tell a story of the true love and compassion that I have for people in that community, or the true love and compassion that I have, especially for young people who are struggling, not just in this manner, but in struggling in general. But Mr. Speaker, love and compassion is truth. I told a story earlier this week on how I got a chance to run through mud puddles with my little niece. Well, we were next to the main road right there in Mexico, Maine, and I held her hand. I didn't hold her hand because I hated her. I held her hand because I loved her, and I didn't want her to run into traffic. We don't tell our kids that they can or can't do things because we hate them or because we're scared of them. We set boundaries for them because we love them. And the love and the truth that I have for these young people who are struggling with this is what forces me to stand and rise today and say that there is another option. And right now, to allow 16 and 17-year-olds without any guidance to just go and do things that are going to permanently change their lives, like what we just heard from Prisha Mosley, who she began her own transition at 17. And then just a few years later realized, what have I done? But her body's permanently changed. The good part of the story is she just went on last year and she did have a child. She gave birth. But I would strongly encourage members of this body to go read that article that I quoted from the New York Times that talked about the physical agony that she went through because her hips had narrowed, her body wasn't fit to carry a child, that she lays her healthy son on her chest and she doesn't feel anything because her skin is numb, that her milk is coming in, but her milk has become hard rocks on her chest that are incredibly painful because there's no nipple there for the milk to come out of. We have young people in our state who are struggling, they're in anguish, they're hurting, they're broken internally. And we need to make sure that we're pointing them in the right direction so they're not making these life-altering decisions that permanently change them. I'm not saying this because I hate them or I'm transphobic. I'm saying this because I love them. I don't want them to scar themselves and change themselves and mar themselves and rob themselves of a perfectly healthy sex life or a marriage or a family or children. And this is a real reality. I had a lot more to say, and I think I said more than I intended. I guess that's what happens when your heart takes over, but I will say that there have been many sentiments shared in this last week about the brain development of young people and how they don't make decisions. They don't make the best decisions when they're younger. And I will quote one thing. This was a quote that was made by a representative that actually introduced the bill, LD 1113, an act regarding fairness in sentencing for persons under 26 years of age. And that representative quoted, "The transformative potential of young people is undeniable. Given that their brains are still developing, they are capable of profound positive change and can overcome their past actions to lead healthy, productive lives. Other states have led the way in this area. That's in reflection to the criminal record side of things. And I know that many of the sentiments that representative gave in introducing 1113, LD 1113 in the Judiciary Committee have been echoed in this chamber. And I would just urge colleagues, although I hate the term urge my colleagues, I would urge my colleagues to stay true to logical consistency, and please vote down this measure.
Pending questions, acceptance of the majority ought not to pass report. Is the House ready for the question? The chair open the vote. The Sergeant Arms secure the chamber. Have all now voted? Chair will close the vote. Clerk on total chair. When that's the vote, 75 voting in the affirmative, 72 in the negative. The motion prevails. It will be sent to the Senate. Is there objection to all matters from act upon being sent forth with the exception of matters being held? Hearing none, ordered sent forthwith. Divided report.
Item
Chair
6X,
stands
to
representative
consider
from Falmouth,
report
Representative Kuhn,
61
Mr. the Committee report being
1134,
sent to this
action
pleasure of the House. It's a vote. The chair recognizes Representative from Falmouth, Representative Kuhn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House accept the majority ought not to pass report.
Chair would inform the member there's report A and report B. Report B is ought not to pass. Report A is ought to pass, as amended. Chair recognizes the representative from Falmouth, Representative Kuhn.
Thank you. We were going between supplements, and I lost where we were. We're B. Thank you.
The representative from Falmouth, Representative Kuhn, moves the House to accept report B, ought not to pass. Chair recognizes the representative from Skowhegan, Representative Poirier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request a roll call.
Representative from Skowhegan, Representative Poirier requests a roll call. Sufficient number requesting a roll call. Roll call is in order. Chair recognizes the representative from Hodgin, Representative Quint.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill is pretty straightforward. It is a common sense approach to protect our girls and women in their athletic activities and their female designated private spaces. The first part of this bill rectifies the injustice of girls being displaced by and competed against by biological males in athletic programs and activities. Mr. Speaker, a young lady in my district has been a driving force behind my support for this form of legislation. I could give you the scientific specifics about the emotional and physical differences between biological males and biological females. Instead, I want to give you an actual example of this travesty playing out in our state and the impact on a girl from my district. Last year, Natalie Johnson placed second behind a biological male in the girls' Class C state championship for the 800-meter run. Our community supported her after the disappointing loss of the rightful position that was denied her. She handled herself with grace and dignity under a devastating political climate that saw her victory tainted and diminished. But what a difference a year can make. By chance, she was not a senior and was able to return to the state championships this year, competing against only biological females. The biological male who won last year chose not to compete in the event this year. Natalie is now our definitive state champion in her event. The smile on her face was joy-filled and redeeming. She is worthy of our support, as are all the girls and young women in our state. This is a real-time example of why this bill is so important. It reinforces the fact that female accomplishments should never be determined by whether or not a male chooses to compete against them. Now, Mr. Speaker, let's address the second part of this bill. What can happen when we allow males into specifically female designated spaces? Why is this conversation necessary? What dangerous situations that we were told never happen, the ones so flippantly dismissed, do happen when we allow men and boys into women's and girls' private and often isolated spaces? Sexual assault. According to the Associated Press, Alexandria, Virginia, a teenager and her parents have filed a $30 million lawsuit against a Northern Virginia school system, saying the district failed to adequately investigate and tried to cover up her sexual assault by a male student in a high school bathroom. The details of the assault, the attacker was wearing a skirt in a women's bathroom, leads to the debate over allowing biological males to use the bathrooms and private spaces of our vulnerable girls. The attacker, who was under 18 at the time, was convicted as a juvenile for the crime of forcible sodomy. He has since been released from a residential facility. I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, regardless of the age of that perpetrator, the girls were no less traumatized, at school no less. Law enforcement did not protect the girls. The school administration did not protect the girls. Instead, the offending student was transferred to another school after the first assault, where he then sexually assaulted another girl. Another unintended consequence of our current policy is that it opens our communities to financial devastation from potential lawsuits that taxpayers will be responsible for. In the case I mentioned, it is a lawsuit for $30 million. For me, the chance of a lawsuit pales in comparison to the suffering of this girl and her family. But taxpayers should be aware of the consequences of our actions. Mr. Speaker, it is beyond my comprehension that we are not concerned that this can happen in our state. It never happens until it does. Those girls must still live with the consequences of their school district not providing protection and justice for them. Our state is knowingly putting girls and women in jeopardy. Mr. Speaker, can you guarantee the safety of our women and girls? Maine girls and women must live out the consequences of our action, or, depending on our vote, our inaction. Please join me in truly supporting Maine women in their most basic form, their womanhood, in both their athletic forums and their private spaces. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There are nine members in queue. Chair recognizes the representative from Bangor, Representative Rader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my mom and Judy Taylor were really good friends, and if you grow up in a very small town, we all know what that means. Judy's kids were like my siblings, and Judy got to tell me to eat my vegetables. Judy's kid Tom and I grew up together and graduated from Newland and Spicer High School at the very same time. Over the course of our adulthood, though, it became clear that we had differing political beliefs, and I may or may not have to mute him on social media during election season. Tom, if you're seeing this, I'm really sorry if this is news to you. When I saw that this bill was coming up for a vote, I reached out to him, and I wanted to hear his perspective. You see, Tom, though we do have differing political beliefs, he has a trans child, and he also has a daughter that was a Division I athlete. I found his response very interesting. My friend, my Republican Catholic military veteran law enforcement friend, and I mention that only to underscore just how different the two of us are, said, interestingly enough, my youngest was a Division I athlete. I asked her this question because I was interested in her take. And here's where I'll break to give a disclaimer. This is his daughter's views, not mine nor Tom's. She said, those who are worried are not that good to begin with. She doesn't have a filter either, lol. And then Tom goes on to say, I'm against any laws that target one group just because they're different. As a veteran, it also upsets me that trans soldiers, airmen, sailors, and Marines are being excluded from service. I'm grateful to Tom that he felt comfortable enough with me to share his thoughts because it's easy for me to assume that this is a partisan issue. Mr. Speaker, I do not assume that anymore. Trans girls are not a threat to high school sports. They're not a threat to anyone. They're children who want to play, who want to compete, who want to be part of a team. And if you've ever loved a child, Mr. Speaker, you should understand how essential that feeling is, the feeling of being included, of being seen, of being safe. So I'd like to call this what this is: unscientific, unconstitutional, and a cruel attempt to fix a problem that does not exist. This bill isn't about protecting girls, it's about policing them, policing their bodies, policing their identities. We're talking about teenagers, children, really. And yet here we are, debating a piece of legislation that would empower adults to scrutinize, interrogate, and exclude young women from their own school committees simply for being who they are. We've seen what happens when fear gets a platform. It doesn't stay confined to floor debates, it spreads. It leaks into headlines, oozes into Facebook comment sections, and fuels mobs of strangers who suddenly feel entitled to dissect and shame a handful of kids just trying to survive. There's a word for that kind of behavior, and I won't say it here because my mom and Judy Taylor taught me better. But we know the word. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the representative from Orono, Representative Osher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And colleagues of the House, I rise in support of the pending motion. Schools, including schools sports, should be a supportive environment that gives every student the opportunity to grow and learn while feeling safe. But the proposal before us today would undermine that goal, not just for trans students, but for all girls. Bans against trans kids playing sports create an environment where any girl's gender can be questioned, an environment which promotes bullying and harassment based on girls' physical appearance. I'd like to share a passage from the testimony of Adele Welch in opposition to this bill. Adele said, "I worry that these bills will harm all girls and all teenagers, trans and cis, as they become subject to not only their own teenage judgment of their changing bodies, but also subject to policing and surveillance of their bodies by their peers, mentors, coaches, teachers, parents, and the government. Just this past weekend, a cis woman in Boston was accosted in the bathroom by a hotel security guard and her gender identity was questioned. By enforcing strict and false definition of gender, we're subjecting kids to harmful questioning and judgment for being too tall, too short, too hairy, too muscular, or simply not feminine enough. I found self-confidence through sports, and I know we want to raise our kids to be proud of their strength and accepting their bodies. These bills introduce unnecessary surveillance and harm to kids and all people of Maine. I share Adele's words because they capture so well the atmosphere of anxiety and fear this proposal would create. Participating in school sports can be an empowering experience for young people, boosting confidence and fostering perseverance in the face of challenges. I know that was certainly the case for me when I was a student athlete. Participating in these experiences is an opportunity that should be available to everyone, including trans girls and any girl who, under policies like these, might be able to feel that they do not belong on the field alongside with their classmates. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the representative from Paris, Representative Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the House. I'd like to look at it from a different angle, if I may, share a lived experience, I guess. So for 30 years, I was a high school football coach. And for 2 of those years, I went from high school football to girls basketball. And I thought that first year, piece of cake, go from one locker room to another. Or was I wrong? I learned right away, you could not barge into a girl's locker room because you were unhappy with practice. I discovered that I couldn't do that. Instead, my captain came out and said, Coach Lance, you have to knock and we'll receive you. Well, that takes away your thunder when you want to express your anger at a practice. But one other thing I've noticed, and a couple of things I noticed those couple of years I went from one to another, is girls had a ferocity about their identity and their team that the guys never had. They never had that. And that always struck me as being unique to those girls and those teams. So I just thought I would share that to you. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the representative from Dexter, Representative Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, early on in my time here in the legislature, I met the late and great and honorable Lois Reckitt. Now, we happened to end up in the hall waiting for a presentation. We got there early and we got chatting and found out we had some things in common, and that mostly was about the fact that her daughter had married a young man that lived in my area. As a matter of fact, his mother and I were in school together. Now, our politics differed a lot, but we found that commonality, and many times we had discussions about who best to get for a furnace repairman in that area, other things. One time, here on the House floor early on, one thing we both did agree on, we both stood up to celebrate the anniversary of Title IX. And she greatly appreciated that law taking effect, federal law, and so did I. And during my floor speech on that issue, acknowledging that anniversary, I mentioned the fact that my mother, who played basketball, she was a tall young lady in Heartland Academy building, she played defense because when she started playing sports, girls couldn't run as much, they couldn't do this and that, and so she just could only play in the partial court defense. A few years later, when I was in high school, I was on basketball team, I tried, and quite often the boys, we would have to wait for our practice time because the girls were having their high school basketball game at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. No night sports for them. And I remember watching Jenny Martell 2 or 3 years ahead of me in school. She was quite an athlete. She could have played pretty much anywhere, I think, in a small school, at least college, post-secondary school in the state, maybe New England. Jenny went on to be went into the Army, went on in a career, retired, had some great accolades. As I read in her obituary, she passed away just a few years ago. She never had the chance, even though we were in high school at the same time, to play a game on a Friday night or to play in a game at the Bangor Auditorium during the tournament. But only a couple of years later, Mr. Speaker, that changed. I was fortunate enough when my daughter was of age to play basketball. She played all the way up through from Pee Wee's right till she was a senior in high school and was part of the first team in Dexter to win the Eastern Maine State Championship, Eastern Maine Championship. And more importantly, my mother was there to watch all of that. And that Title IX law made all of that possible. Mr. Speaker, I just want to say, is in regards to being in opposition to the pending motion, I am so because when my daughter was playing on that team, they had one of the best teams in the state. But I can tell you right now, my son, who was on a team a couple of years ahead of her, most of the guys that were sitting the bench and most of the guys that were on the JV team that were playing at the same time as my daughter, they could have replaced most of that girls' team. And I don't think that's what Title IX had in mind. I think Title IX was designed specifically to get those biological female girls a chance to participate in the same type of opportunities that the boys had and still have today. And I don't think it's fair that we take away that opportunity for any girl. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes the representative from Carmel, Representative Thorne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to the pending motion. As I've said before, I'm a Maine girl dad. I'm a Maine girl papa. I'm a Maine girl uncle. I'm a Maine girl cousin. I'm a Maine girl son. I'm a Maine girl son-in-law. I'm a Maine girl nephew and a Maine girl brother. I'm a Maine girl friend and a Maine girl husband. And today I stand as a Maine girl legislator. I never thought that I'd be in the middle of this type of discussion, disagreement, persuasion. But in my high school that I represent, Herman High School, Olivia Hunsinger was on the far right of that podium that got my seatmate censured. She should have been one more over in her mind. I went with her to the Herman Town Council meeting where she spoke. I went with her to the Herman School Committee meeting where she spoke. She spoke about girls' rights to their sports. Today, I don't stand in front of you to talk about Olivia Hunsinger. Today, I stand in front of you because I got a phone call this week from Olivia's grandfather, Mikkel Verrill's grandfather. Mikkel had assignment in school. They had various topics that they were going to pick. The topic that Mikkel picked was biological males in girls' sports. And she chose that one. On March 24th, she submitted a paper that she thought was going to be submitted to me, her state representative. This week, on June 10th, is when I received the call from her grandfather, and she forwarded me the letter. Dear Mr. Thorne, my name is Mikkel Verrill. I am a student athlete at Herman High School. I was talking to several of my friends about trying out for spring sports. One of them said to me, I don't want to compete against a male during this season. So what's the point in trying out? Instantly, I thought of how a talented athlete is being discouraged for competing because of the possibility of transgenders participating in her sport. Do you think women should be scared to try out for a sport because of a transgender male being in that sport? I am writing to you because I believe that it is unfair for biological men to participate in women's sports. I would like to see the Maine legislature pass legislation preventing men who identify as women from participating in opposite gender sports. This topic has received a lot of attention across the country and currently is affecting Maine students. I have a personal interest in this topic because I am a member of the Herman varsity softball team. I have outlined my position, supported by evidence below, and I look forward to your response. Studies show that men and women are different in many ways, but one big thing is hormones. During puberty, males develop denser, stronger bones, tendons, and ligaments. According to Battle of the Sexes, men have more testosterone, which means this results in more muscle mass and bone density. This is a strong physical advantage over women. According to Alliance Defending Freedom, you'll notice that all these athletes have one thing in common. They are all males competing in women's sports. It's not often that you hear of a controversy involving female athletes competing in men's sports, and the reason for that is simple and obvious. Males have a physical advantage over females in most athletics. Men are a lot stronger physically than women. It should be very unfair if I went up against a biological male in softball. He would be able to throw harder, hit farther, and lead the team. Women's sports are separate to make sure that the playing field is fair and equitable. Peyton McNabb was a 19-year-old girl that was struck by a volleyball in the face by a transgender woman and now is suffering from traumatic brain injury. When she was hit, she blacked out for 30 seconds and was helped off the court. Peyton was diagnosed with a concussion, neck injury, and two black eyes while being on the court. A couple weeks after she was diagnosed with traumatic brain injury, brain bleeding, partial paralysis, and loss of peripheral vision on her right side, Peyton still suffers from headaches and anxiety. According to NCAA recent policy changes, men's category open to all eligible student athletes. Women's category restricted to student athletes assigned female at birth. Schools directed to foster welcoming environments on all campuses. Riley Gaines is an advocate against transgender athletes in women's sports. According to Riley Gaines, after Riley directly experienced competing against a man in a women's sport, being forced without warning or consent to undress before the fully intact male and subjected to discrimination by the NCAA, she became one of the most powerful voices to speak out against the injustice, challenging the rules of the NCAA, USA Swimming, International Olympic Committee, and other governing bodies. Males have an unfair advantage over females. The work required isn't as much as women. According to Alliance Defending Freedom, you don't really see women transfer to men's sports to be in a better position. But men are coming into women's sports and taking places on podiums and teams, which are making women very upset and not wanting to compete anymore. Soon enough, biological women aren't going to want to try to become the very best if biological males are taking over podiums and spots. There are claims that banning transgender athletes from participating in women's sports is a form of exclusion. However, I believe that allowing transgenders to participate in women's sports puts women at a physical disadvantage. It is unsafe for women and robs women of scholarships and recognition. According to whitehouse.gov, men in women's sports is demeaning, unfair, and dangerous to women and girls, and denies women and girls the equal opportunity to participate and excel in competitive sports. Sincerely, Mikkel Verrill. She's a junior at Herman High School, and she just made the all-Penobscot Valley softball team. Mr. Speaker, these are not my words. These are the words of a very diligent young lady who's a junior in high school that worked very hard to make this paper, to send it to me, her representative, so that her words could be shared. I asked her if it would be okay if I shared this. Her and her family agreed. She said, "I hope it works." Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes the representative from Brewer of Simhoe Holleran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise as a freshman legislator to speak on an issue of growing interest. How do we define fairness and inclusion in all girls sports teams? But before I get to my speech, I would like to acknowledge my views are not popular in my party, and I want it to be known that I have always been a strong advocate for empowerment of women and girls. And to the representative from Bangor, whatever that word may be that your mom and Judy Taylor would not want you to say, I am not it at all. I am a proud mom of two talented and hardworking daughters who thankfully were provided an opportunity to compete on all girls sports teams, starting in grade school, through travel teams, middle school, a lot more travel teams, high school, and beyond. They have learned leadership, the meaning of camaraderie, and a life skill of pushing far beyond their physical limits. My girls and their amazing teammates and opponents have suffered tough losses, major injuries, and the opportunity to celebrate hard-fought victories. They relished every chance to compete against other exceptional, tough, and talented female athletes to improve their own games. Mr. Speaker, I say to you this is the purest form of an experience that you can get in competitive athletics, right there. And I would like to say, compassion without wisdom is just as dangerous as wisdom without compassion. Mr. Speaker, we do not yet know, as I think all of you must admit, to say without learning more about the effects of transgender girls and all girls sports to be fair to all participants. My position is based on fundamental fairness, not bias. I believe all parents want to see their children play high school sports to the best of their abilities. The reality is that very few athletes make varsity teams or get those opportunities. Very few. Mr. Speaker, clearly, in many sports, there are physiological advantages to males competing with females. I think this is reality. We collectively do not know enough of the effects of trans medically and scientifically to balance the effects of trans girls in sports. It is not biased. Trans girls competing in male sports have been shown to be considerably less successful than they do in female sports. This is a fairness issue, Mr. Speaker. And to be clear, I have no tolerance for bullying and hate or exposing children to public ridicule and harm, particularly athletes that are following the rules that are currently in place. It is unacceptable and reprehensible. This is not a question of denying anyone's identity or dignity. Every child deserves to be supported and respected. Mr. Speaker, I absolutely support the right to transition with proper guidance. But we also need to recognize that allowing trans athletes and all girls sports teams gives trans athletes an advantage that they would not otherwise have. And to me, this is not fair. Mr. Speaker, I am standing before you to ask my fellow legislators on both sides of this aisle, Republican and Democrat, to not take away the hard-fought gains our girls and women have made in athletics on these, and to not take away the opportunities and fairness that Title IX provides to girls and women in athletics. The fairness that women have fought for, Mr. Speaker, for over 55 years, 55 years, and I'll say it again, 55 years, and we're finally making some competitive gains, but we still do not have parity. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the representative from Falmouth, Representative Kuhn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to address the committee process and in reviewing this and some other bills related to sports teams. We received an abundance of testimony on a wide variety of topics, and it was clear to me that it was not our role or our responsibility to try to figure out what the right rules might be for college sports or professional sports or international competition, events reported on social media from other states, even trends internationally, all of which we were exposed to in the course of our public hearing. As a legislator in Maine, I thought that our job was to evaluate the position of this issue relative to K through 12 kids here in our state. Through that lens, the evidence was overwhelming. We heard from educators and administrators, pediatricians, psychologists, and other stakeholders who all pointed us to the following considerations. First, it's evident that this issue is limited in scope. The MPA has reported that there are approximately 45,000 high school athletes in Maine. Of those, there's somewhere between 2 and 4 girls, transgender girls, who are participating on girls' teams. That is about 0.006% of high school athletes. That is what I would call targeted legislation, a law meant to apply to less than a handful of teenagers. Second, I think it's important to recognize the history with respect to transgender girls participating in Maine sports. There is nothing new to see here. Since 2014, the MPA has allowed trans athletes to participate in sports aligning with their gender identity, so long as they pursued an application process initially. In reality, all of the applications submitted were approved. So this has been the express practice in our state for many years. And I would further submit that it appeared for a long time to proceed without any real discord. Third, when it comes to creating a school environment where all kids can thrive, targeting a small group who oftentimes are already marginalized and subject to harassment is harmful to every student. This kind of targeting behavior, especially when it's sanctioned by adults, creates an environment where no student feels safe. It undermines their sense of safety and belonging and distracts them from learning. We heard a story from a cisgendered girl who was bullied in her locker room because the other girls didn't think she was feminine enough. And that was painful, because I think a lot of us can recognize that the pressure of conformity to a feminine ideal is already something that girls and women have to deal with their whole lives. And legitimizing that expectation in schools from an early age sets a harmful precedent. Finally, the lack of any parameters on implementation of this bill will result in increased body scrutiny for all kids. What if a student presents with a birth certificate that says female, but someone's notion of femininity or someone's memory suggests otherwise? How will schools determine that conflict? Will the school nurse get involved? Will there be blood tests? Will there be hormone tests? Will there be body checks? This is why in communities that have laws like this, student participation is lower, because all kids are afraid of that kind of body scrutiny, especially at that age when they already feel vulnerable about their size and their shape and their body composition. In summary, looking at this issue from the lens of school and student safety, the evidence was overwhelming. Inclusion of all kids so that they feel welcome and supported is the right path forward for all of our kids, which is why I will be supporting the pending motion. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the representative from Kennebunkport, Representative Gear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have struggled over this bill and some of the other bills that we are dealing with today. I've actually had sleepless nights, including last night, in really thinking about how we balance these issues that impact girls, both those assigned female at birth and those who transition, all of whom I believe we all value and love, to the good representative from Rumford's point. Mr. Speaker, the Maine Human Rights Act prohibits discrimination by both sex and gender identity. And students in both those groups should have the ability to participate in competitive sports. The challenge that I've been rolling around and around in my head is, what about the places where the protection of the rights of both groups intersect and/or conflict? The bill before us doesn't deal with that. It simply proposes a blanket ban. It doesn't deal with many things. It doesn't deal with sports-specific considerations that might be different if it's an individual sport or a team sport. It clearly doesn't deal with the differences by age or grade in school. For example, should requirements around these issues be the same for students in elementary school as for high school students after puberty has kicked in? And Mr. Speaker, in other states, it appears, and I by no means am any expert in this, that the school sports governing body for the state as a whole is able to take a role in determining policies and ways to accommodate trans girls while also preserving fairness for girls assigned so at birth. Mr. Speaker, since 1972, when Title IX went into effect, before 1972, about 30,000 women played college sports in the U.S. And since then, in today's world, we have seen an explosion of girls being able to really excel in sports and compete at a high level, as well as now, I was sitting in a bar the other night, and on the TV was a women's basketball game. And we're just hearing now about a women's softball league actually being formed. And I think we can all celebrate that, and I think that we all will be very happy when we see more and more of that in our world. Mr. Speaker, I don't know the path forward on these issues, but I do know that the approach proposed in LD 1134 of a blanket ban is not the way to go. My preference would be for a process that would really do a sport-specific analysis about the best ways to accommodate and deal with both the issues of fairness and safety that I believe that are legitimate concerns in many places, especially in looking at the high school years and above, and at the competitive championships that occur around the state and around the country. So I don't know the path forward, but I do know that I will be supporting the pending motion on the bill for those reasons. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes the representative from Palermo, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to rise and speak to several things said by the representative from Falmouth. One, I really do have to take objection to the word targeting. We are not targeting anyone. We are standing for another group of individuals, for the girls. We have never said that we have any hatred or despise in any way the other people who are participating in girls' sports, the people who identify as girls, but we are not targeting anyone. The second thing I have to say is that when one transgender individual competes in girls' sports, they are disenfranchising hundreds of other girls. When that one person stands on that podium, they have pushed every girl down and taken their spot. The high percentage of championships that they have taken from girls is much more than just several boys. And regarding body scrutiny, how do you think a girl feels being naked in a locker room with a boy? Whatever he identifies at, whatever process he's gone through with hormones to call himself a girl, you don't think a girl feels that she's being scrutinized when she's naked with a boy there who she's maybe always known as a boy, maybe since they were kindergartners together and he's just transitioned? That's body scrutiny, and that is wrong. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the representative from Portland, Representative Moonen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The representative from Portland, Representative Moonen, has challenged the presence of a quorum. The chair will issue a quorum call. Have all now voted? Have all now voted? Have all now voted? Chair will close the vote. Clicker untold. Chair's in error. Chair will close the vote. Quorum is present. The chair recognizes Representative from Portland, Representative Moonen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, colleagues of the House, I rise in support of the pending motion. I just want to say that almost every single piece of debate that we've heard on this bill so far has been about sports. I want to make sure that people understand that the bill in front of us is much broader than sports. There are other bills coming later that are only about sports. We have already had debates about bathrooms and other facilities of public accommodation. We've heard about the Maine Supreme Court case with Nicole Maines from over a decade ago. I urge us to focus on what is all of the content that is in this bill and recognize that the sports debate can continue in other bills. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Hodgson, Representative Quint.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would disagree with the good representative. I believe my speech was very clear in speaking to the entire bill. Just to reiterate the using of female facilities, and when I discussed the consequences in which 2 girls were raped at school. Thank you.
Pending questions, acceptance of report B ought not to pass. Is the House ready for the question? The chair opened the vote. The Sergeant at Arms secure the chamber. First call of absentees. Have all now voted? Chair will close the vote. Clerk on toll. Chair will announce the vote. 73 voting in affirmative, 72 in the negative. The motion prevails. It will be sent to this. It's already been to the Senate. Is there objection to all matters next upon being sent forthwith, with the exception of matters being held? Hearing none, order to send forthwith. Chair would turn members' attentions back to supplement number 1, item 6-5. Divided report. The chair understands Representative Falmouth, Representative Kuhn, Mr. the committee report be dispensed with this pleasure of the House. It's a vote. Chair recognizes Representative Falmouth, Representative Kuhn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House accept the report B ought not to pass.
Representative from Falmouth, Representative Kuhn moves House to accept report B ought not to pass. Chair recognizes Representative from Skowhegan, Representative Poirier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like a roll call, please.
Representative from Skowhegan, Representative Poirier requests a roll call. Sufficient number requesting a roll call. Roll call is in order. Pending question is acceptance of report B ought not to pass. Is the House ready for the question? Chair recognizes the representative from Caratunk, Representative Caruso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my honor to support LD 868, which is an act to ensure equity and safety in athletics and safe private spaces. Before I start speaking about the bill, I just want to just share that, it really saddens my heart to hear the pain that we've heard all morning and afternoon. It saddens me to walk down the halls and see people holding signs thinking that, I or someone here is against them. And, my heart has always been that I care about all kids passionately. And my heart is that all kids will know that they are loved and seen, that they are accepted, no matter what they're going through, no matter what they look like, no matter where they're from, regardless. Every child is a gift. Every child is valuable and precious. And before we start talking about my bill, I just want that to be clear, because the heart behind this bill is that all kids get to play, they get to have fun, and they get to be safe, and they get to be accommodated for. And as a high school 3-letter varsity athlete, 2-letter varsity athlete in college, I care deeply, not just about kids, but about making sure that everyone has opportunities to enjoy and to have fun and to get all the benefits that competitive sports brought to me. And so I wish we could all just wash ourselves and start over. I know that many of our youth are going through many challenges, whether it's emotionally, mentally, physically, physiologically. And I believe that Maine can absolutely provide compassion, safety, and support for our students, including those who are struggling with identity, and still preserve the privacy and equal athletic opportunities for all our kids. And I believe that 868 can do this. I tried really hard, I searched hard for a vetted language that would provide safety and clear direction for the state of Maine to move forward from the situation that we're finding ourselves in. Gender identity may be neutral in many or most areas of school life, but when it comes to physical sports and private spaces, sex matters. Even Justice Ginsburg, in a 1996 Supreme Court case, wrote about the inherent physiological differences between males and females. I won't go into, I have it, and maybe at some other point it can come up, but I won't go into it. But this is a recognized fact. By denying the physical advantage of males over females and ignoring Title IX protections, Maine has denied equal athletic opportunities for Maine girls. It's not just unfair, it's discriminatory. The reality is that girls' sports will not be sustainable if this continues. You see, because as soon as one male has a spot on a female team, it's no longer a female team. It's co-ed. And the girls have lost Title IX opportunities. There is nothing also holding back every position on the girls' team from going to a male. As soon as one male can use a girl's locker room to change his clothes, the girls' room has become co-ed, and the girls have lost their privacy, their private spaces that Title IX created for them. Maine girls should never be forced by their school to give up their privacy and feeling of safety. I don't know of any parent who would force their daughter to strip or expose herself to a male against her will, or a parent who would force their daughter to be exposed to a male against her will. And surely the Maine government shouldn't either. I have heard from plenty of parents who agree. Now, I'm saying this, there be no confusion, I am not saying that a high schooler who is transitioning or wants to change his identity is someone that I'm necessarily afraid of. This is opening the door to adults. In the judiciary, we heard enough about the horrors of sexual assault victims and how prevalent crimes are against our youth. The state of Maine should never have policies which could further traumatize our youth, including girls who have been victims of sexual assault or trafficking, or create an open door of opportunities for new harm. I heard from DAs, prosecutors, and law enforcement, even from southern Maine, that this legislation is critical to protect our girls from sexual predators posing as transgender imposters just to get into girls' restrooms and locker rooms. That's why LD 868 accommodates the needs of all students. It maintains separate private spaces and allows for schools to offer single-user options to any student who, for whatever reason, is uncomfortable using changing rooms of their sex. And it happens. High schoolers, we've all been there. With regards to LD 868 and how it differs from all the other sports bills that have come before the chamber, LD 868 treats all athletes the same. It sees all athletes the same, so there isn't discrimination. It provides a clear eligibility standard based on sex for teams and spaces. Now, sports have always been organized through eligibility criteria, whether it's weight, sex, or age. For example, in wrestling, a 180-pound wrestler doesn't compete against 120. An 18-year-old high schooler doesn't compete against a junior high. Even in older divisions of sports, you don't have a senior class against a 20-year-old. And men don't compete against girls unless it's co-ed, due to physical advantages. A student's sex is not going to be determined by surveillance, so let's just clear that up. A student's sex is easily determined by their doctor's sports athletic form, which is already required in order for any athlete to compete in school sports. It is filled out by a doctor. There is no inspection, there is no surveillance. That would be horrific. Now, what's so great about 868 is that every child gets to choose between two teams that they can play on. So it treats everyone the same. You can either play on the team of your sex, whether it's male or female, or you can play on a co-ed team. Everyone gets the same 2 options. The schools and the MPA can create a separate standing or league for fair competition and for the purposes of listing competition results in a just and fair manner. They do this. Just a couple years ago, they created an 8-person boys soccer team and an 8-person girls soccer team. So this is something that they are able to do, and they do. Everyone gets to run, swim, and jump. You just don't have to put the scores of a biological male in the girls column. That's all. LD 868 provides for sex-designated bathrooms, locker rooms, and the option for housing for when teams are traveling. So a girl doesn't have to share a hotel room or even, a dorm space with a boy if she doesn't want to. It's an option. It covers every athlete K through college, all the way up. It protects schools and colleges from retaliation, and it provides a legal remedy for students. LD 868 brings Maine into compliance, and it ensures federal funding. It will eliminate the chaos that Maine's current policy has inflicted on our schools, boards, and school budgets. It will ensure that federal funding gets to our schools. And it brings Maine into alignment with Title IX, federal anti-discrimination laws, the executive order, and the NCAA policy that only females can play on female teams. We heard a little bit about that before. But just to go further, the NCAA stated, quote, "We strongly believe that clear, consistent, and uniform eligibility standards would best serve today's student athletes instead of a patchwork of conflicting state laws and court decisions." Not only is 868 in 26 states already in the United States, but it will make sure that our school competitions are consistent with the NCAA policy and prepares Maine girls to have proper standing when they are applying for college, when they are being looked at by recruiters. If other states are only allowing girls to compete, then our girls will be at a disadvantage if they are in the number 2 spot and then instead of the number 1 spot, and they're trying to get onto that Div 1 or Div 2 or Div 3 college team. So this brings Maine girls into comparable standing across the country. And keep in mind, this a college scholarship may be the only way a Maine girl can afford to go to college. Now, if anyone thinks discrimination against women hardly ever occurs, it's growing. Worldwide, Maine athletes have won more than 4,100 victories, over 7,000 top 3 finishes in female competitions, impacting more than 13,000 competitions. According to the UN and multiple scientific papers, current evidence indicates that identifying as transgender, with or without the use of puberty blockers, testosterone suppression, and/or cross-sex hormones, does not erase the inherent male athletic advantages. In my testimony, I had all the quotes. It was very lengthy, and I'm not going to take the time. I just want to know that I have citations for anything that I'm saying and quoting. Speaking of the UN, in 2024, United Nations General Assembly report titled "Violence Against Women and Girls, Its Causes and Consequences" found just a couple things I'm going to point out. One is that females are more likely to sustain injuries when playing against males, citing instances of broken bones, concussions, knocked out teeth, skull fractures, and brain damage in volleyball, basketball, and soccer. I think we heard a little bit about some injuries earlier today. And that number 2, this is their report, that men are taking awards, trophies, roster spots, playing time, resources, and opportunities from women every day. It is not just a couple of athletes in the state of Maine. It's just we're not hearing about it as much because people are afraid to talk about it. But there have been injuries on soccer teams in southern Maine with males playing on the girls' team. We heard testimony from girls in PE classes with boys coming into the girl locker room. This is 13 years old, 8th grade. This is happening more than we know, and it's just becoming more and more prevalent in terms of there are more and more students who are looking to change their identity. And so I'm only saying that because it's not what I heard earlier today, just 2 athletes. So, and I'm saying it because we want to be proactive. We want to have Maine have a path forward to make sure that there is safety and equity across the state as things progress. Mr. Speaker, Maine can do better for our athletes. The overwhelming majority of Mainers across the state are asking us to act to bring common sense legislation. This is fair, it's safe, it's about safety and opportunities. Passage of 868 ensures that Maine students, including those who are transitioning, are protected and accommodated, and that fairness, opportunities, privacy, and safety are preserved for all athletes on and off the field. It also provides clear direction and guardrails to our local schools while ensuring their federal funding is provided. One thing that we heard from the schools and the association is they're looking for clarity. They don't want confusion. They want clear direction from us. And I believe that 868 brings that. It is, like I said, it's enacted in 26 states. It's been vetted, and I believe it's a clear path forward. I encourage the body to vote yes. Thank you.
Pending question is acceptance of Report B. Chair recognizes Representative Portland, Representative Moonen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to say again that most of this debate has been about sports, and we have yet to reach the sports-only bill, and want to remind everyone that this bill is much broader than sports. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes. Pending question is Report B. Ought not to pass. Is the House ready for the question? The Chair open the vote. The Sergeant at Arms secure the chamber. First call of absentees. Have all now voted? Have all now voted? Chair will close vote. Clerk run total chair will announce the vote. 72 voting in the affirmative, 72 in the negative. The motion fails. Chair recognizes Representative from Portland, Representative Moonen.
Mr. Speaker, I move that this item be tabled till later in today's session.
Representative from Portland, Representative Moonen moves this item be tabled until later in today's session. Chair recognizes Representative from Winter Harbor, Representative Falkingham. I can hear. Chair recognizes Representative from Portland, Representative Moonen.
Mr. Speaker, tabling is not debatable. I'm not sure what you want me to say.
Sorry, the chair's in there. Representative from Winter Harbor, Representative Falkingham has requested a roll call. Sufficient number requesting a roll call. Roll call is in order. Tabling motion is not debatable, so for those of you in queue, there's no comments to be made. Pending question is table until later in today's session. Is the House ready for the question? Chair, open the vote. The Sergeant Arms secure the chamber. First call of absentees. One member who has not yet voted. Have all now voted? Chair will close vote. Clerk Round Toll. Chair will announce the vote. 73 voting in the affirmative, 72 in the negative. The motion prevails. Chair, return members' attention to supplement number 3. Supplement number 3, reports of committees and first reading company bills and resolves. Divided report.
Item 6
Chair stands representative from Reed for Lips of Hassenfuss, for the committee for abuse, for this point of the House. It's a vote. The chair recognizes representative from Reed for Representative Hassenfuss.
Mr. Speaker, I move the majority report of the committee on not to pass.
Representative from Reed for Representative Hassenfuss moves the House accept the majority ought not to pass report. Is this the pleasure of the House? Chair recognizes Representative from Oakland, Representative Nutting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request a roll call.
Representative from Oakland, Representative Nutting requests a roll call. On sufficient number requesting a roll call. A roll call is in order. Pending question is acceptance of the majority ought not to pass report. Is the House ready for the question? The chair open the vote. The Sergeant at Arms secure the chamber. First call of absentees. Have all now voted? Chair will close the vote. Clerk Round Toll. Chair will announce the vote. 112 voting in the affirmative, 32 in the negative. The motion prevails. It will be sent to the Senate. Divided report.
Item 6
Chair stands representative from Kennebunkport, Representative Gear, Representative Kennedy for abuse, to the pleasure of the House. It's a vote. The chair recognizes Representative from Kennebunkport, Representative Gear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House accept the majority ought to pass as amended by Committee Amendment A report.
Representative from Kennebunkport, Representative Gear moves the House to accept the majority ought to pass as amended by Committee Amendment A report. Is this the pleasure of the House? It's a vote for reading the bill.
Be enacted by the
Kennebunkport, Representative Gear moves the bill. Be to the pleasure of the House. It's a vote. The clerk will read Committee Amendment A.
Committee
Kennebunkport, Representative Gear moves the Committee Amendment A. Be dismissed to the pleasure of the House. It's a vote. It's the pleasure of the House to adopt Committee Amendment A. It's a vote. Is objection to suspension of the rules purposing this bill so agreed at this time? Hearing none, so agreeing the bill by title only.
An act to allow residential use development in commercial districts.
This bill, having a two-self reading and suspension of the rules, is now the pleasure of the House to be passed, being engrossed and sent for concurrence. It's a vote. It will be sent to the Senate. Is objection to all matters acted on being sent forthwith, with the exception of matters being held? Hearing none, order sent forthwith. Divided report. Chair stands representative from Kennebunkport, Representative Gear, Representative Kennedy for abuse, to the pleasure of the House. It's a vote. The chair recognizes Representative from Kennebunkport, Representative Gear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House accept the majority ought not to pass report.
Representative from Kennebunkport, Representative Gear, moves to accept the majority ought not to pass report. Is this the pleasure of the House? It's a vote. First reading of the bill. Chair's in error. It will be sent to the Senate. Is there objection? All matters have act upon being sent forth with the exception of matters being held. Hearing none. Order sent forth with. Chair now lays before the House supplement number 4, consent calendar first day.
On consent calendar first day, there are two items. Two items on consent calendar first day.
With respect to items 7-1 through 7-2, unless there is objection, the items committee reports be accepted and suspension rules be immediately placed on consent calendar second day's listing. Hearing none. Chair recognizes Representative from Milford, Representative Drinkwater.
We're on 6. I'm sorry, my mistake.
Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Consent calendar second day and suspension of the rules.
On consent calendar second day under suspension of the rules, there are two items. Two items on consent calendar second day under suspension of the rules.
With respect to the two items on consent calendar second day's list, unless there is objection, the House papers will be considered passed, being grossly amended, and sent for concurrence. Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Is objection all matters not being sent forthwith, with the exception of matters being held? Hearing none, ordered sent forthwith. Chair now lays before the House supplement number 7, Senate papers, non-concurrent matter.
Item 1-1, Senate Bill 849 LD 1200, Act to prohibit the sale of items intended to be used to inhale nitrous oxide for recreational purposes. Minority ought not to pass report of the Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety when accepted in the House on June 11, 2025. Comes to the Senate with that body having insisted on its former action whereby the majority ought to pass the amended report of the Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety was read and accepted. The bill passed being grossly amended by Commitment A and non-concurrence.
It is the pleasure of the House. The House insists. Chair recognizes Representative from Oakland, Representative Nutting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move we receive and concur.
Representative from Oakland, Representative Nutting moves the House receive and concur. Chair recognizes Representative from Portland, Representative Moonen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request a roll call.
Representative from Portland, Representative Moonen requests a roll call. Sufficient number requesting a roll call. Roll call is in order. Pending question is receive and concur. Is the House ready for the question? Chair open the vote. The Sergeant at Arms will secure the chamber. Three members who have not yet voted. Have all now voted? Chair will close the vote. Clicker on total. Chair will announce the vote. 55 voting in the affirmative. Affirmative, 90 in the negative. The motion fails. It's the pleasure of the House. The House insists. It's a vote. Is there objection to all matters tonight upon being sent forthwith, with the exception of matters being held? Hearing none, ordered sent forthwith. Chair lays before the House supplement number 8. Messages and documents from the Senate, the executive heads of departments, and others. Communication.
Item 2-1, House Communication 198, State of Maine Clerk's Office 206.
From Henderson, Mr. This communication be dismissed with the pleasure of the House. It's a vote. It's now the pleasure of this communication be placed on file. It's a vote. Chair now lays before the House supplement number 9, consent calendar first day.
On consent calendar first day, there are 3 items. 3 items of consent calendar first day.
With respect to items 7-1 through 7-3, unless there is objection, the unanimous reports we accept in suspension of the rules be immediately placed on consent calendar second day's listing. Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Consent calendar second day under suspension of the rules.
On consent calendar second day under suspension of the rules, there are 3 items. 3 items of consent calendar second day under suspension of the rules.
With respect to the 3 items on consent calendar second day's list, unless there is objection, the House papers will be considered passed, being grossed as amended, and sent for concurrence. Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Is there objection to all matters tonight upon being sent forthwith, with the exception of matters being held? Hearing none, order sent forthwith. Chair now lays before the House supplement number 10, bills and their passage to be enacted, emergency measure.
Committee on Gross Bill supports the following emergency measure. Item 10-1, House Paper 348, LD 529. An act to establish the Alamoosic Lake Watershed Management District. Truly and strictly engrossed.
This bill, having its 2 civil readings about the Senate, been passed and being engrossed by the Senate, and having reported by the Committee on Gross Bills is truly and strictly engrossed, is now the pleasure of us to be passed and be enacted. This being a emergency measure in the terms of the Constitution requires enactment, the affirmative vote, 2/3 of the entire commission of those. Those in favor of passage of the emergency measure will vote yes. Those opposed will vote no. Is the House ready for the question? The Chair will open the vote. Have all now voted? Chair will close vote. Clerk on total. Chair will announce vote. 116 voting in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. 116 being more than 2/3 of the entire commission of the House. This bill has been passed, being enacted as an emergency measure. Be signed by the Speaker and sent to the Senate. Emergency measure.
The Committee on Gross Bill supports the following emergency measure. Item 10-2, House Paper 350, LD 531. An act to establish the Toddy Pond Watershed Management District. Truly and strictly engrossed.
This bill, having its 2 civil readings about the Senate, been passed and being engrossed by the Senate, and the Committee on Gross Bills having reported is truly and strictly engrossed. Is it now the pleasure of this bill be passed and be enacted as an emergency measure? This, on the terms of the Constitution, requires for its enactment the affirmative vote 2/3 of the entire commission of the House. Those in favor of passage of emergency measure will vote yes. Those opposed will vote no. Is the House ready for the question? The Chair will open the vote. Have all now voted? Chair will close the vote. Clerk on total. Chair will announce the vote. 121 voting in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. 121 being more than 2/3 of the italic members of the House. This bill has been passed, being enacted as an emergency measure. Be signed by the Speaker and sent to the Senate. Emergency measure.
Committee on Gross Bill supports the following emergency measure. Item 10-3, House Paper 1163, LD 1745. An act to stabilize residential treatment capacity for children and youth in Maine. Truly and strictly engrossed.
This bill, having its 2 civil readings about that Senate and the Committee on and having been reported by the Committee on Gross Bills is truly and strictly engrossed, is it now the pleasure of us to be passed and be enacted. This being emergency measure in the terms of the Constitution requires for enactment the affirmative vote 2/3 of the entire commission of the House. Those in favor of its passage of emergency measure will vote yes. Those opposed will vote no. Is the House ready for the question? Chair will open the vote. Have all now voted? Chair will close the vote. Clerk on total. Chair will announce the vote. 109 voting in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. 109 being more than 2/3 of the tally of members of the House. This bill has been passed, being enacted as an emergency measure. It will be signed by the Speaker and sent to the Senate. Emergency measure.
Committee on Gross Bills supports the following emergency measure. Item 10-4, House Paper 16, LD 52. Resolve requiring the Department of Health and Human Services to study options for allowing children in the department's custody to receive federal benefits. Truly and strictly engrossed.
This resolve having two separate readings about the House Senate been passed, being engrossed about the House Senate. The Committee on Gross Bills having reported is truly and strictly engrossed. It is now the pleasure of the House to be finally passed. This being emergency measure in the terms of the Constitution provides final passage. The affirmative vote, 2/3 of the tally of members of the House. Those in favor of its final passage of emergency measure will vote yes. Those opposed will vote no. Is the House ready for the question? The Chair will open the vote. Have all now voted? Chair will close the vote. Clerk on total. Chair will announce the vote. 107 voting in the affirmative, 2 in the negative. 107 being more than 2/3 of the tally of members of the House. This bill has been passed. This resolve has been passed, being enacted as an emergency measure. It will be signed by the Speaker and sent to the Senate. Regular enactors.
Committee on Gross Bills supports the following items. Item 10-5, House Paper 105, LD 172. An act to require the Maine State Police to create a statewide list of missing persons and study improvements for investigating missing persons cases. Item 10-6, House Paper 779, LD 1174. An act to limit the liability of gun shops that provide firearm hold agreements. Item 10-7, House Paper 980, LD 1496. An act to ensure ongoing access to medications and care for chronic conditions by changing requirements for prior authorizations. Item 10-8, House Paper 995, LD 1511. An act to expand direct health care service arrangements. Item 10-9, House Paper 1119, LD 1684. An act to implement additional criteria and processes for the supervised community confinement program. Item 10-10, House Paper 265, LD 411. Resolve directing the Attorney General to update rules relating to the disposition of forfeited firearms. Truly and strictly engrossed.
In reference to items 10-5 to 10-10, these 5 bills in this resolve having their 2 separate readings about the House Senate been passed to be engrossed both the House Senate and the Committee on Gross Bills having reported them as being truly and strictly engrossed. Is it now the pleasure of the House these 5 bills be passed, be enacted, and this resolve be finally passed? It's a vote. They'll be signed by the Speaker and sent to the Senate. Is there objection to all matters from act on being sent forthwith, with the exception of matters being held? Hearing none, ordered sent forthwith. Chair lays before the House supplement number 2. Chair return members' attention to item 6-2 on supplement number 5. Sorry, chair's in error. Chair now lays before the House supplement number 5. Chair return members' attentions to item 6-2. Reports of committees and first reading company bills and resolves. Divided report.
Item 6-2 is Senate Bill 157,
the chair from Kennebunkport, Representative Geary, the committee report be submitted to the pleasure of the House. It's a vote. The chair recognizes the representative from Kennebunkport, Representative Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House accept the majority ought to pass as amended by Committee Amendment A report.
Representative from Kennebunkport, Representative Geary moves the House accept the majority ought to pass amended report. Chair recognizes the representative from Pittsfield, Representative Collmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I request a roll call and wish to speak to my motion.
Representative from Pittsfield, Representative Collmore requests a roll call. Sufficient number requesting a roll call. Roll call is in order. The member may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill as amended has a new title. It's called an Act to Establish a Moratorium on the Sale of Mobile Home Parks. This bill is yet another attempt to tell mobile home park owners what they can and cannot do with their property. In this case, the amended version of this bill prevents mobile home park owners from selling their property within 90 days of the adjournment of the first special session of the 132nd Legislature. It does not take into consideration that property owners may be selling because they can no longer afford to operate, or they are retiring, or any other reason that a property owner may want to sell their property. It does exempt the purchase of parks by resident co-ops and the transfer of property to family members. Basically, we are telling property owners that it's okay for the state to stop you from selling your property to whomever you choose. Mr. Speaker, we've worked together on property owner rights bills together in the past. I feel that this bill goes against the good faith work that we and others in this body have done to ensure that property owners have the right to expand their property or transfer their property to somebody else. Please help protect those rights and vote against the pending motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes the representative from Kennebunkport, Representative Gear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, LD 365 is an emergency bill because, Mr. Speaker, we have an emergency. While we are working on policies to preserve affordable housing in mobile home parks, people's homes are at risk right now. In one park, almost 300 households have formed a cooperative association to purchase their park. They've worked together to form their co-op, elect officers, learn about and execute the process, and complete the required documents. They've met all the deadlines, but the clock is against them, and their time may run out. Our colleagues at Maine Housing and the Genesis Fund are aware of other parks that are also under threat. LD 365 will pause the sale or transfer of large communities for 91 days to allow new protections to be considered and enacted on. Without these protections, consequences may come to pass that are all too predictable, and none of us want to see these for residents. And it's important to note that LD 365 exempts sales or transfers to family members from the moratorium. Mr. Speaker, this bill is an important measure that the legislature can take to help ensure we don't lose another 300-plus affordable homes in at least one mobile home park, if not more. Mr. Speaker, I had the great pleasure to attend the ribbon cuttings in both Brunswick and in Bangor, and it was such a great pleasure to see the enthusiasm with which those resident cooperatives were purchasing their parks and charting their own future, and we need to buy some time here for others to be able to do the same. I urge my colleagues to support the pending motion on LD 365. Thanks very much.
Pending questions, acceptance of the majority ought to pass as amended report. Is the House ready for the question? The chair open the vote. The Sergeant at Arms will secure the chamber. First call of absentees. Second call of absentees. Two members who have not yet voted. Two members in their seats who have not yet voted. One member who has not yet voted. Have all now voted? Have all now voted? Chair will close vote. Clerk on toll. Chair will announce vote. 73 voting in the affirmative, 71 in the negative. The motion prevails. First reading of the bill.
Be enacted by the people's statement as follows. Concept draft.
Representative Kennedy, Representative Gear, Mr. the committee of the bill be dispensed with this pleasure of the House. It's a vote. The clerk read Commitment A.
Commitment A.
Chair
is
understands
part of
Representative Kennedy, Representative Gear, Mr. the
medical
Commitment A be
by
dispensed with this
state
pleasure of the House. It's a vote. So now the pleasure of the House that Commitment A be adopted. It's a vote. Is there objection to suspension of the rules? Purpose of this bill, seconding at this time. Hearing none, seconding the bill by title only.
An act to respond to the housing affordability and accessibility crisis in Maine.
This bill, having its two separate readings and suspension of the rules, is now the pleasure of the House to be passed, being engrossed in concurrence. It's a vote. It will be sent to the Senate. Is direction on all matters acted upon being sent forthwith, with the exception of matters being held? Hearing none, ordered sent forthwith. Chair now lays before the House supplement number 13. Bills and their passage to be enacted emergency measure.
Committee on Gross Bill supports the following emergency measure. Item 10-1, Senate Bill 794, LD 1986. An act to fund collective bargaining agreements with judicial branch employees. Truly and strictly engrossed.
This bill having its two separate readings, both the House Senate, been passed being engrossed, both the House Senate having reported by the Committee on Gross Bills is truly and strictly engrossed. It is now the pleasure of the House to be passed being enacted. This being emergency measure in the terms of the Constitution requires an act with the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the entire members of the House. Those in favor of this passage emergency measure will vote yes. Those opposed will vote no. Is the House ready for the question? The Chair will vote. Have all now voted? Have all now voted? Several members in their seats who have not yet voted. Have all now voted? Chair will close vote. Clerk on toll. Chair will announce the vote. 102 voting in the affirmative, 34 in the negative. 102 being more than 2/3 of the entire members of the House. This bill has been passed, being enacted as an emergency measure. Will be signed by the Speaker and sent to the Senate. Is direction all matters acted upon being sent forthwith, with the exception of matters being held? Hearing none, order sent forthwith. Emergency measure.
Committee on Gross Bill supports the following emergency measure. Item 10-2, Senate Bill 358, LD 793. Resolved to establish the working group to review and update the laws governing harness racing. Truly and strictly engrossed.
This resolve having its two separate readings about that Senate been passed being engrossed, but the Senate Committee on Gross Bills having reported is truly and strictly engrossed. It's now the pleasure of the House to be finally passed. This being emergency measure, the terms of the Constitution requires for the final passage of the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the entire members of the House. Those in favor of final passage will vote yes. Those opposed to final passage of the emergency measure will vote no. Is the House ready for the question? The Chair open the vote. Have all now voted? Chair will close the vote. Clerk on toll. Chair will announce the vote. 114 voting in the affirmative and 2 in the negative. 114 being more than 2/3 of the entire membership of the House. This resolve has been passed to be enacted as an emergency measure. Be signed by the Speaker and sent to the Senate. Regular and actors.
Committee on Gross Bill supports the following items. Item 10-3, House Bill 138, LD 215, an act regarding large recovery residences. Item 10-4, Senate Bill 664, LD 1669, an act to establish the Cannabis Advisory Council. Item 10-5, Senate Bill 747, LD 1906, an act to improve accountability and understanding of data and insurance transactions. Item 10-6, Senate Bill 463, LD 1135, resolved to convene a working group to study the use of oral fluid testing to determine intoxication of drivers, aircraft operators, and hunters. Truly and strictly engrossed.
In reference to items 10-3 through 10-6, these three bills in this resolve having their two separate readings of both the House and Senate been passed being engrossed by both the House and Senate, and the Committee on Gross Bills having reported them as being truly and strictly engrossed. Is it now the pleasure of the House these three bills be passed being enacted and this resolve be finally passed? It's a vote. They'll be signed by the Speaker and sent to the Senate. Is there objection to all matters acted upon being sent forthwith, with the exception of matters being held? Hearing none, ordered sent forthwith. Chair now lays before the House supplement number 14, consent calendar first day.
On consent calendar first day, there's one item on consent calendar first day.
With respect to this item 7-1, unless there is objection, the unanimous report will be accepted and suspension of the rules may be immediately placed on consent calendar's second day's listing. Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Consent calendar second day under suspension. Chair recognizes Representative from East Machias, Representative Toole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that this item be set aside wherever we're at in the process and wish to speak.
Item 7-1 has been set aside. Pending question is passage to be engrossed. Chair's in error. Pending question is acceptance of the unanimous committee report. The chair recognizes the representative from East Machias, Representative Toole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I'm going to ask for the roll call right off the bat, and I'll explain why in a minute.
Representative from East Machias, Representative Toole's request for roll call. Sufficient number requesting a roll call. Roll call is in order. The member may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I rise today in strong support of LD 182, which at its core affirms Maine's commitment to those who have given their best years in defense of our nation at home and abroad by providing a stable, steady source of funding for the 6 Maine veterans' homes in our state. One of those homes happens to be in neighboring Machias, which until redistricting a few years ago was part of my district and is now ably represented by the representative from Harrington. Because of that, Maine Veterans Home Machias in particular, and Maine Veterans Home in general, has always held a special place in my heart. I've always worked across the aisle to give the residents, their families, and the staff who compassionately care for and love them as if they were their own parents or guardians a voice here in Augusta. We have debated many contentious issues this session, even a few today, but we also have gone through what I consider to be a lot of trivial and superfluous bills. But it is bills like this to ensure Maine veterans' homes can stay open, serving our small rural communities and those veterans who have retired there for the rest of their days, which is why we're really here. I first visited Maine Veterans Home Machias back in 2014 and have kept going back time and again. My church goes there every Christmas to sing carols to the residents. Our local elementary school, which teaches kids about the area's rich tradition of alewife harvesting, takes a fresh batch of smoked fish to the residents for lunch at least once a year. And I've been there for countless functions, honoring the residents and the facility for all they've given. But Maine Veterans Home is in trouble and has had to come back to the legislature every year since I've been here to ask for badly needed funding just so they can keep providing the quality elder care our veterans and their families have come to expect. We were warned 5 years ago that the homes in Machias and Caribou were on the brink and would have to close without help. That request was pushed to the side until nearly 2 years later, the homes started the process of shutting down and shipping veterans out of the places they'd called home. The legislature responded with funding in a bipartisan way. And while I had some reservations about that legislation at the time, the legislature made a commitment that no veterans home in Maine would close without our consent. We passed that law, and we are obligated to follow through for the veterans of Aroostook and Washington counties, and those who are served by each of the other homes. For those who live in central, western, and southern Maine, we said that no veterans home would close on our watch, and we owe that to those who gave it all for our freedoms to follow through. It's that simple, and it's why I commend my friend from Bangor in putting this legislation forward. Regardless of what happens with the budget, this to me is a must. 2 or 3 weeks from now, when we are all home marching in our 4th of July parades and enjoying the summer, a budget will be enacted, whether we voted or we didn't. Whether we support that or we don't, we all should agree that Maine veterans' homes and keeping them whole must be a top funding priority. As I close, Mr. Speaker, my first 8 years in this building involved fighting to keep our Down East Correction Facility open. I dare say I gave the representative from Newport a good bit of grief pushing for that, and would do so again. I don't bring that up to open up old wounds, but to say that I have and will continue to fight for the survival of things in our county and resources in our county, like the veterans' homes, as long as I'm here. I just hope that this is the last year we have to keep coming back, hat in hand, for the funding needed to keep them from shutting their doors and denying our most faithful, selfless defenders the care that they need in their sunset years. I will hold my head high at the 4th of July parade in Lubec this year, the parade in Pembroke, and the parade in Machias, because I will be supporting the men and women who fought for our liberty. I will go to the Lubec Lions chicken barbecue and see my friend Bubba Eaton, who asks every chance he gets about the future of the Veterans Home and what we're going to do to keep it open. And I hope I'll be able to tell him and the many like him that we have lived up to our commitment and funded the place so many of our veterans call home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the representative from Bangor, Representative Supika.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will be brief, and I just am rising to thank the good representative from East Machias for his kind words, and to say that I stand as the chair of the Veteran and Legal Affairs Committee, and I think I could safely say that I could speak for all the members of the Veteran and Legal Affairs Committee this session and past sessions to say that this is an important institution in our state, and so we appreciate him drawing attention to the issue of the Maine veteran homes and the continued funding so that they can stay open. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the representative from Harrington, Representative Strout.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. As the good representative from East Machias stated, the Machias Veterans Home is in my district, and I'm honored to have it there. They do a wonderful job taking care of our veterans. They involve them in the community. They allow their families to be close to them. We have several veterans through the history of Washington County that have given back to make sure of what we have today. And I know funding is always an issue, and I can't think of anything better than to spend it on those that have given so much so we can stand here and have our debates today. So I hope when the appropriations goes through, they look and they remember that even though we don't know them all, we owe them all. Thank you.
It is now the pleasure of the House to accept the unanimous committee report. Chair's in error. Chair's in error. The representative from East Machias, Representative Toole, has requested a roll call. In order for the chair to order a roll call, the chair's in error. A roll call is in order. Pending question is acceptance of the unanimous committee report. Is the House ready for the question? The chair open the vote. The Sergeant at Arms secure the chamber. First call of absentees. Have all now voted? Chair will close the vote. Clerk run total. Chair will announce the vote. 143 voting in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. The motion prevails. First reading of the bill. The representative from Eastern Machias, Representative Toole, Mr. Reading the bill, recess with the pleasure of the House. It's a vote. Is it? The clerk will read Commitment A.
Commitment A is
If Sir Reeds Machias
H-702.
substitute will move to the Commitment A be dismissed at this pleasure of the House. It's a vote. It's now the pleasure of the House that Commitment A be adopted. It's a vote. Is there objection to suspension of the rules purpose against bill second reading at this time? Hearing none, second reading the bill by title only.
An act to require the Department of Health and Human Services to establish Maine care reimbursement rates for the Maine veterans' homes on a per-resident basis.
This bill having its two separate readings and suspension of the rules is now the pleasure of the House to be passed, being engrossed and sent for concurrence. It's a vote. It will be sent to the Senate. Is there objection to all matters having been acted upon being sent forthwith with the exception of matters being held? Hearing none, ordered sent forthwith. Chair would request the leaders approach the well. Announcement from the chair. We have received and will be receiving another 21 divided reports. Not that all of them are potential for debate, but there's a number of them that are coming into our possession. As of this morning, there were 64 divided reports left in committee. That didn't include some of the ones that are coming up from committees during the course of the day. So in the spirit of really looking to next week and having a good portion of our work complete, reducing another 20 off the docket and leaving us with 40-ish for next week seems quite worthwhile to me, and hopefully to all of you. So we will take a little break so folks can get some sustenance, especially me. I've been up here this entire time, and I'm feeling a little, I don't know, missing that a roll call was in order is a little unlike me. So I would like to get a little something. So we will, I know the caucuses, the party leaders intend to caucus. We'll do that. I'll turn to them for announcements. We'll plan to return here at 6:30. Chair recognizes Representative from Winter Harbor, Representative Falkingham.
House Republicans will caucus at 5:30.
Chair recognizes the Representative from Portland, Representative Moonen.
House Democrats will also caucus at 5:30.
The House will be at ease until the sound of the bell.